All right, thank you again. We've gotten the camera working. I hope the audio is okay. We will be starting in just a minute. Again, our schedule here at Sunshine Fest is 5 minutes behind when the webinar started, so I'm apologize for that. No, it's on. All right, as once our last final panelist gets here, we'll kick things off. Oh,
Yes or no?
yeah, please.
Great. And if not, I can volunteer my seat too.
Thank you. Wow. Hello. What's the big books? No, mine's. All right, I'll start. We have one more panelist, Urban, who will be joining us, but we'll start with some introductions. Seeing as the schedule got moved around a little bit, and the panel is a little bit shorter than originally intended, but we also have fewer panelists than originally intended. So I think everything will work out in the end. Welcome to Sunshine Fest and this breakout on artificial intelligence. Welcome also to all of you online who are joining us as part of this symposium discussion. For those who don't know, this panel is also part of Americans for Prosperity Foundation Sunshine Week Symposium. My name is Ryan Mulvey. I'm an attorney working on FOIA matters at Americans for Prosperity Foundation. This is our 5th annual symposium, and we were very excited to have the opportunity to partner. Excuse me, let me close this panelist screen. Very happy to be able to partner this year with the Brechner Center to incorporate the symposium as part of a breakout and to bring the work of our contributors to all of you and this discussion. Wow. This year's theme is AI, advanced technology, and FOIA. I won't give too much of an introduction, and I'll give an abbreviated introduction to our panelists. You can see their full bios on the website, as well as on their essays, which are at americanprosperity.org/sunshine. We have Alex Howard, who is a writer, digital governance expert, and open government advocate based here in Washington, D.C. He edits Civic Texts, a publication focused on emerging technology and governance. We have Jason R. Barron, who is professor of the practice in the College of Information at the University of Maryland. He previously was a trial lawyer and senior counsel at J, and was the first director of litigation at the National Archives and Records Administration. And we have Nicholas Wittenberg on the left, Jason. He is corporate counsel and senior advisor for legal technology and innovation at R Media, and previously was at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and EPN before that, if I'm not mistaken. And Irvin McCullough at the Anti-Earth, who is co-founder of FOIA Friend and a consultant on open government issues, deals a lot with whistleblowers, and I think are you still contracted with Government Accountability Project? Yes. So today's panel, as I mentioned, is about AI and advanced technology. And technological developments have always been a part of the history of the FOIA and have always posed new and exciting, at times, and difficult realities for administration of the statute. I think the transition from paper to electronic records and the advent of email are two examples where even Congress had to step in to make sure that the statute was still going to work. But in recent years, the advent of artificial intelligence and I think generative AI in particular, the sorts of things that you see on ChatGPT that you can ask Adobe now to create for you and so forth. The role of those sorts of technologies in FOIA is a very new topic, and one that all of our speakers today have written on and will be addressing. I would just say very generally, when I think of AI and FOIA and where the conversation needs to go, there's basically four buckets. There's how can AI be used to improve the customer experience, both in terms of requesters' interaction with an agency, and the requester being able to draft and submit FOIA requests, right? So the requester as a requester and the requester as a customer of an agency. How does AI play into that context? There's also the role of AI in assisting agencies with implementing the statute, but outside the context of subsection 8.3, which are what everybody usually thinks of as FOIA, your sort of reactive FOIA requests. For example, using AI for Rehabilitation Act 508 compliance, or proactive disclosure, reading room interaction, and so forth. We also have how AI works with agency processing in the search process, responsiveness review, and the application of exemptions. And then finally, there are some practical considerations. The cost and acquisition of AI systems, interoperability of AI across different agencies, and then, of course, the impact of AI on litigation and judicial review. With that, we're going to start just by each of our panelists giving some opening statements, and then we'll get to conversation and then to questions and answers. So hopefully we'll have some. So we'll go straight down the row. We'll start here with Alex.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Sunshine Fest and Sunshine Week. We're having this conversation at a moment when, fortunately, we're seeing secrecy and liberalism sweep over our government. We're seeing the idea of transparency being touted, whereas the reality of it is being withdrawn. Artificial intelligence has been touted as a panacea for all of our ills, but it does not replace the need to have humans who were involved in the process to make the kinds of decisions that I think empower the public, to arm us all with knowledge in the way that Madison talked about. This is Sunshine Week. We should be focused on transparency. There is no question, I think, that there's tremendous potential for AI in the buckets that Ryan talked about. There are ways that we've already seen AI being used in the United States government under the really big umbrella of machine learning, the kinds of technologies that have existed before generative AI, to help The kinds of things that in fact are allowed in the first branch in Congress to transcribe, to translate. One of the most obvious areas, something I've cared about a long time, which is liberating data for PDFs. Our government is still publishing information like it's print, as opposed to something that is open and machine readable. Garbage in, garbage out is a very old idea in programming, and it's even more true in AI. If we do not get better data, you will not get better outcomes. If government agencies are not publishing information by default in open formats, you will not be able to see AI be able to do very much of it work outside of government. And for that to actually change, we need to see investments in the civil service. We need to see appointees willing to invest in people. We need to see governments willing to actually implement the laws that they pass to ensure that machine readability is not an after effect to try to bolt in, but something that's put in by default. It is simply not credible to imagine that we can automate all aspects of something that is a profoundly human process. I'm very interested to see what my colleagues here have to offer. I want to focus on one particular issue, which is the transparency of the process. If we imagine that there's a world in which AI is being bolted on to discovery, to getting requests out, then that itself has to be transparent in terms of how it works. LLMs often are not explainable to people, right? You cannot simply say, publish the source code of the algorithm in a way that you can for other kinds of areas where public sector code is being used to make decisions. And there's lots of examples now around the world where we've seen algorithms make decisions that impact people's lives directly. College admissions, in terms of loans, in terms of access to information. We've seen it used to deny people understanding of how things are affected. And if we allow generative AI to be bolted on into these systems, we should expect a different kind of secrecy to come in. And it doesn't matter whether you're coming from the conservative side or the liberal side or the progressive side or otherwise. That is going to affect your ability to get information out of government and to not be able to contest it, because the process by which it was discovered, the process by which it's redacted, will not be obvious. I want to say one final comment. My colleague Daniel Schumann mentioned during the discussion that all ideologies support the FOIA, and that is not true. Communists, theocrats, and fascists do not. In any country where they gain control, one of the first places they crack down is upon freedom of information and the press and dissidents. And we need to have a really clear discussion about who is actually in control at the city, state, federal levels, and whether they do in fact have shared goals or not. And those of us who believe in the Constitution and the rule of law and Freedom of Information Act need to find common cause and marginalize those voices, because otherwise we will lose access to information when we all know it's the bulwark against corruption and authoritarianism.
Hi, everybody. Jason Barron at the University of Maryland. So I don't think of AI as Republican or Democrat, and I'm very happy to talk in a nonpartisan way about my issues. I do want to make one point, though, that anyone out there in the political world that says that we can fire FOIA staff because AI will take over what humans do is just plainly wrong in doing that. We are not anywhere near the stage where AI can replace FOIA review in government by real people. So having said that, I just want to set the table here. Ryan was very kind to invite me here and for me to write an article on Gen AI, but I want to step back and say this. I'm sure that people in the room are familiar with Robert Caro and his books on LBJ. I've read all four of them. I'm waiting for him to read the fifth one, to write the fifth one on Vietnam. And every day for decades, Robert Caro has showed up at the LBJ library in Austin. He's asked NARA archivists to get boxes for him, and he's poured through what the public thinks is dusty archives. Well, in June 2024, there was a marker date that had been a long time coming from 2012 on with the first memo that says that the National Archives will not take paper anymore. It's all digital or electronic. And So there won't be journalists or historians coming in the future to the National Archives to look for records that were created after June 2024. It's all on servers. It's all in the cloud. And similarly, that memo that was issued by OB and NARA said that the entire government should manage its electronic records, manage its records electronically, some of which are designated as permanent, coming to the National Archives. But there are now, just to put a point on this, stick a pen or whatever, there are 700 million White House emails through the Biden administration, Reagan to Biden, which at the National Archives, representing about 3 billion pages if they were printed out, both emails and attachments. And there are billions and billions of emails and electronic messages that are created every year by something on the order of 400 governmental components. There is also the capstone email archiving policy, which has been adopted by about 250 government components. And under that policy, senior officials' emails are permanent, and everybody else's are to be preserved for 7 years. Now, with respect to FOIA, we are long past the time of manual searching and keyword searching. I want to make the emphatic point that I've been talking about as an evangelist, as a lawyer for 20 years, that keyword searching is like horse and buggy searching. One needs machine learning if you're up at scales of hundreds of thousands or millions of documents. And just a week or so ago, I listened to a fascinating hearing in the Crew versus Doge case, which involved a FOIA request by Crew, not only to Doge, but also to OMB. And the DOJ lawyer stood up, and there is an argument about whether Doge is a FOIA agency or not, and that's to the side in what I'm making the comment here. But with respect to the OMB side, which is a federal agency and is FOIAble, the DOJ lawyer said, well, we have to do keyword searching, and it's going to take months and months to go through and find responsive records. And we all know that many agencies take not only months, but years to respond to requesters. That it's taken years for my FOIA request to be responded to, and no one does machine learning. Yes, there are a few agencies that are even, a step ahead, particularly outside at the State Department, has made great strides in deep class as well as FOIA, but it isn't done. And the time is now classic machine learning, known as technology assisted review or predictive coding in the e-discovery world. We know how to do this for 20 years, but the typical DOJ attorney, and I was one of those at some point in my career, stands up in court and talks about keyword searching. And the public advocacy community doesn't challenge the fact that it is, in my mind, per se unreasonable to conduct keyword searches that will take months or years to then have documents searched for and then review. One can do what the government is doing in weeks rather than months or years. We did it in our private law firm that I was in, and the most agile places in the United States know how to do it in the legal community. So that's my overarching point for this morning, which is with respect to AI, we are way past the time where these kind of representations should be made in court, accepted by plaintiffs, sent by defendants, and accepted by judges. And I will reserve my time on Gen AI. I have things to say with respect to how one could construct narratives with Gen AI and to have a better civic engagement with Gen AI. And hopefully we'll have time for those comments. Thanks.
Awesome. Also want to thank fellow attorney Ryan who invited me to speak in the combination. Ryan is a partnership in now for budget committee, ASAP board, and he has a quill. So always loved his legal case update. He did one this week, and then he did it with his mentor, Dick Huff, a few months ago. So it's exciting to be here and chat. And good to see Jason. Also want to recognize our FOIA advisory committee members in the room, Jason and Ryan, Frank, Margaret, good friend Bobby back there. And this has been kind of a fun thing for me. So I came from the starting world. First saw speaking at events. And growing up as somebody who loved movies. So if anybody saw a movie called Enemy of the State, Big Brother, Data. Unfortunately, when I got into government, I think Steve mentioned some of this new technology called PDF. Unfortunately, that is still new. And the other one is paper. And so I love swimming upstream with government and seeing that we were not launching rockets, but this has been tried and true by Jason Tolman from some other individuals out there where records are just exploding. We all, and I say you put a data center out in Utah that has, I think it's exabytes, it's very small. And so that's something federal family, state and local government, we have to involve in. And so in government, I love working with FOIA because great issues. Just the other day, we had more JFK files come out. So Nate Jones, trying to get an inside scoop from him about what is there, if JFK film was correct, or we still have to wait for it. But that's always interesting because somebody who loves documentaries, shows like American Greed, or Frank CNN has United States Scandal, which I just did, I think, Abscam. So it's always exciting to see that. And I think it's good to see what is not working, what is inefficient, what is being promised. And so that is something for me that I love from attorney and from litigation. Now the reverse for Ryan it's the attorney's fees, but since he knows from my article, I get to monetize. I appreciate the reverse money from this way. But it's definitely, I think the conversation is good. And I think colleague of mine, Mike Sarah, chose on the tech committee, we put an article together about the similarity between e-discovery and FOIA. And I think organizations, government get so hung up. When I was a young law, asked all the time about a question. That's a water question. I'm a fair. And I wasn't asking the director to go to report, just kind of a memo analysis. Same thing, I think, in FOIA, people see in discovery is plaintiff is requester, but it's information, it's data, oversight, congressional. There's a lot of information out there, and seeing how we buy in a very siloed fashion. I think in the FOIA world, it's copies. It's like a movie, implicit. Further the copy goes, the less the quality gets. And we can do this a little faster. And I also look at just so many things are out there. I noticed the friend from Ohio State, from the Ohio State University, is I know a lot of us in the room went to law school, but could you imagine? I saw a library out there, small library, and I was so fascinated by those things called books. But if a client was to say, hey, go to Westlaw, Alexis, go to the library, dust the books off. And then I think that's what was happening during that. And I couldn't agree more about having to be agent human in the loop. We've all heard about hallucinations, and we've seen a lot of that. I think same with FOIA. I was chatting with somebody today about generative AI is hot on the scene. But with FOIA, we can hit a request and what we've already produced line and not have callbacks because another party in the office decided to act everything. I didn't. They get the court and what embarrassing. And it causes a clock. So there's a lot of things. And I'll also say why FOIA is so exciting for AI. This is not when the driver's here. There's people in the microphone. Yeah, sorry. And this is not Waymo, the driverless cars that are out there. And so I think it's definitely right. And I think in my article I put out a couple of points, and I do federal contract, tighten that up to make it a little bit more efficient. So 2 years from RFI to RFP, because most times the tax rates 2 to 3 years information is outdated. Additionally, federal, a expensive, long process to host government cloud. And you go through that. Unfortunately, I don't think our adversaries be swayed by federal process. Probably get excited. So that is something I think, and I work at our media. We're excited to help our federal colleagues out through that journey. Because data is huge. And how can we do it more efficiently is a buzzword, but how can we have experts in the room? And then if you report our good times OIPs and forward chief officer report. They audit your report. And sort of make that, so for current reporting staff, leadership, individuals. So there's a lot of opportunity for this. And I think what is nerve wracking is folks at this newfangled ChatGPT website, put your foot in the pool, try it out, use it. Get involved with the tech community, reach out to the board advisory committee, go to events and shows. And this is something that I really enjoy because nerve wracking is when Ryan's request comes in, some of this stuff we can get this for you. We know that information. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we get that request. And I think as our good friend at OGIS will say, reaching out and having a better customer service process, great. What I will say, Ryan, there's like in the traditional litigation, Plains Bar historically did not have the DSR tools, but they're now doing it. If we requesting communicated information exchange would be so much more holistic. Instead of the 5,000 page PDF, you could get that rich file. The next thing coming is not the video, but what communities want modern links. If you think of Google Drive, do you need the copies, so redline, what's much there, or do you like that link system? Where I don't think 1,000 page printouts. We're pushing the technology, not only for government, but looking at our requesters so they can have a more informed decision about documents that they can saying, well, this page 28, is that part of the email? Yes, it's a child attachment. So super excited to be here and really excited for the conversation. So,
hi, folks. My name is Irvin McCullough. I'm the co-founder of FOIA. Thank you for having us, Ryan, and for the annual symposium. I really do recommend folks read the essays online. They're pretty good. I really appreciate that. About 3 years ago, a friend of mine told me that AI could write. I didn't really believe he was using AI to help some bookstore owners write letters to the editor against local book bans. And I wondered if they could write a FOIA request. So I hooked up with the OpenAI GPT API, and I tried to write a FOIA request. It was absolutely terrible. Couldn't send it to anyone. About a year later, ChatGPT came in. And I figured, hey, why don't I just try this out, see if it's gotten any better. It had. Surprisingly, the request was significantly better than it was a year before. When OpenAI swapped out the current model with GPT-4 a few months after that, it was even better. I figured that there could be some way, there had to be some way for requesters to make use of AI. I was working for the Senate at the time, and I was on the Senate Sergeant at Arms working for FOIA, staff level thing. We got to talk to people that were at the frontier labs and hear what they were actually doing, see whether or not we should be using these technologies for professional staff. And when I left the Senate, I started talking to some of the same folks at the different labs. I realized that AI progress was speeding up tremendously, and that potential to use this stuff, especially to help people write FOIA requests, process FOIA requests, was almost endless. So I called a friend of mine who worked at an AI lab, and he told me to slow my horses, and that FOIA is not going to be solved overnight or within 5 years. It's going to be very, very, very hard to implement a lot of these technologies. But what we wound up doing was creating a platform for right now journalists and expanding to others. I learned to code. He helped me learn to code. And we realized very quickly that we didn't want to rely on large language models that were very slow, very costly, even though they're getting faster and cheaper. So, kind of like what Professor Barrett was saying, we went back to the basics. We built a machine learning model, a multi-label text classifier, talking with hundreds of FOIA officers to find out what made a bad FOIA request in particular, what made a good FOIA request. Every single FOIA officer mentioned specificity, that you need to have a specific request. Second dimension is scope. You need to have a request that isn't overly broad. The third is FOIA compliance. You actually need people request documents that are not releasable very, very, very often. And really, I come from the requester community. I used to be a freelance journalist. I've submitted thousands of FOIA requests. After the first 3 conversations, I thought these FOIA officers were trying to pull one over on me, and they're trying to pull one over on the requesters. After talking to dozens, I realized no, they pointed me directly to their FOIA logs and said, no, just pick a random request at random, and you will see that some of them are kind of bad. Bad FOIA requests slow down the process for everyone. So what we figured out is if we can have our draft request that is rated on a score of 0 to 100 on those three dimensions, specificity, scope, FOIA compliance, we can then get 3 scores and call in those more powerful large language models to recommend specific offices, regular custodians mentioned in the request that the user can then include, increase their specificity score. We can give suggestions for narrowing the scope of the request to make it so that they don't have to wait so long. The FOIA officer doesn't have to, if you're trying to go through 4 different, these records are held by 4 different equities agencies, that's going to extend the time significantly. And by doing that, we hope that we're going to be able to clear the backlog a little bit, or at least contribute to clearing the backlog. So that's our platform. FOIA Trend. More than that, we talk about answering questions, we talk about how it works and frame behind it, how we do all this kind of stuff, and how AI is going to change the game for requesters. But overall, we have a platform that's opening up on Monday. You can go to our website, and requesters will be able to submit directly to our platform to the different agencies. And you also get to throw in a D-Wave. We got that kind of stuff.
All right, before we, part of the Sunshine Fest and these breakout conversations is we want some ideation, we want a lot of audience participation. Before we jump to Q&A, and I also step up to see if anybody on our webinar has posted questions as well. So I apologize if I'm jumping back and forth because I'll be checking. I want to flag, 4 thoughts I had in reading all of the essays, which again, Americans for Prosperity Foundation.org/sunshine. You can see all the contributions, but also in these initial opening statements, 4 areas, and you don't have to talk about them, you can talk about something else, but that I'm still interested in. First, Alex, you have mentioned here and elsewhere, one of your passions is open data and all the stuff that you have. How are there ideas for how AI can be implemented within the federal government to allow, what's your dream way to see AI make it easier for people to navigate all the raw data that the federal government might put out? So obviously, one area of data that there's been a lot of discussion about, DOGE posts a lot about is stuff that's on USA Spending or websites like that. What would be a great way for AI to use to navigate all that information? Another, practically, and I know we have some government folks in the room. We lost our government panelists, unfortunately. But I hinted at before, just the acquisition costs and the logistics. I know the Chief Oil Officers Council with its COCACI, which I'm probably not going to be able to remember, cross-agency collaboration and help me out, Mike. Coordination. Them and the technology committee. There was a subcommittee on AI at one point, and they had a discussion. But agencies are in different places, so how long until we see something seriously implemented across multiple agencies instead of pilot programs? 3, I always hear a lot of pushback from the requester community about how AI, at least at this stage, would deal with the discretionary nature of a lot of FOIA, the perceivable harm standard, and is it really maybe just a limit of the technology now and the sort of background information we stick into the AI systems for, as I understand AI, if you ask it to analyze something like foreseeable harm standard, it's based on input, right? So if it wants to consider, it can consider the context of the record, but if you want to draw on other public interest issues or other news developments, the AI only has access to the information it has access to. So is there anything to be said there? About the limits, and I guess hallucination of AI. Jason, I know you touched on that a bit in your of it, and not being a problem so much, at least on the case law front, with the narratives and determination matters. But is there anything to be said there? And then last is, does the statute need to change at all to accommodate AI. I mean, certainly I think in terms of judicial review, cases will need to catch up. I mean, if you research adequacy opinions, they still talk about does the declaration from the agency identify the keyword search terms? And where would those keyword search terms run? Like, to your comments, Jason, what would a declaration look like that describes machine learning being implemented for FOIA processing? So we have those. Let's have a quick open mic session. You don't have to talk about that. Talk about something else. I'll run the mic down and then we'll jump to some questions.
Thank you. That's a lot, Ryan.
I know.
That's great. So I'm going to have to repeat the questions that we'll go through. So 3 quick things. First of all, the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency is a government entity. It is conducting public business. It is creating public records. If the decision is that it's part of the executive office of the president, then it's creating presidential records. And they must be preserved, and they must be accessible via FOIA through the Trump Library in 2034. I mean, it's going to be a while, but they are absolutely records. And the question right now is whether they're accessible under FOIA now or later. But we should not allow the idea that you have a quasi-governmental agency to conceal public reasons. Second thing is, I am saddened that Bobby Talebian is not able to present to you all, and he was not able to give out FOIA awards at the beginning of this week at the Justice Department, as they've been doing for years upon years, to recognize the FOIA professionals who do this work day in and day out, often to requesters who don't understand or are very hostile or upset, because he would have been able to present on FOIA.gov/wizard and talk about the improvements that have been made to that effort, if you go check it out, including something very important, which is the effect upon the rest of government and how they disclose FOIA logs, which is an incredible mess. This is an obvious place where the US government dogfooding its own data has resulted in better data, and then getting to something important, which is the question you asked. Now, I want to get to a quick definition here. Raw data is me as a scientist, which is how I was trained, taking logs, measurements on a given day. Structured data is when I put it into a spreadsheet. Information is when I analyze that structured data to get something out of it. Knowledge is understanding that information in context. Wisdom is knowing when to apply it. We have more raw data than ever before in human history. We're generating vast amounts of it at an increasing pace. The good people over at the National Security Agency, the IC across the way, don't really behave like that's us, like that's our records, right? The NSA and FOIA don't go together very well. None of the IC does. The Pentagon laughs about these things. They're always trying to exempt it. When I was at the Sunlight Foundation, we had to fight repeatedly against them trying to exempt themselves. But at a really granular level, data, when it's milled into insight, when it's applied, not in the real time, but in the right time, enables people to make better decisions, including people who were entrusted with making good public policy. My ideal end state is that the law itself becomes machine readable so that we can understand the impact of a given amendment, not only on revenues, but people who are making that decision or putting the amendment have access to the evidence to understand those decisions. And that's true across the board. The law that I worked on, the Evidence Act, which included the Open Government Data Act that Trump signed into law in 2015, makes machine readable data the default in US government. But that only happens if there's human capacity, funding, political leadership, and a cultural shift. And that hasn't happened yet. And my hope is that part of this conversation digs into that and holds our officials accountable for implementing that law, so that some of the things my colleagues are talking about here in terms of outcomes are possible. Because otherwise, we're going to continue to see records that are not digital. And with respect, Jason, the way that this stuff does go back is it's only accessible through a research library out in College Park. You have to go there in person. And we all know that those kinds of access can be restricted.
Right. Let me just second that, Bobby. I consider you a hero, and Bobby Talebian and national treasure. So to answer Ryan's point, in keyword searching, one puts in a bunch of terms, and you can be sophisticated with Boolean, and you get back 100,000 hits. The government says, hey, it's going to take too long to go through that, or it's going to take forever for review. a declaration of the future that talks about what the government did with machine learning and technology assisted review is that there was a process put in place that rank ordered documents by weighted their weight. And what the algorithm does is you train it. You feed in a bunch of documents that are responsive, and the algorithm finds all the other documents in a list of 100,000 or a million that are possibly responsive and with weights from 1.0 to 0.0. And you can concentrate on releasing those documents that first have been identified as most likely to be responsive first. And so it's low-hanging fruit. It is literally possible to do this with the algorithm in days or weeks rather than running a keyword search for much longer time and then reviewing everything because there's nothing that's prioritized. So those are the declarations of the future. The cost of putting license in effect by the vendor community is not that great compared with cloud procurements in government. So that's the point there. Let me say that William Gibson, who coined the term cyberspace, is famously quoted saying, the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed. And so we have pockets of agencies that are a little bit ahead on thinking about AI, and then there's the rest of agencies. And I'm glad to hear that there are efforts in the requester community to use Gen AI to make better requests. The research that I have been a part of as an academic, I consider myself a recovering lawyer, but as an academic, it has been to apply AI to FOIA for the deliberative process privilege to see if algorithms can basically segregate out deliberative content and how reliable that is. And so that you can find the stuff that might be withholdable and all the stuff that is probably not withholdable, and you still need humans in the loop. But what is more exciting is a second stage of research where looking at the narratives that Gen AI methods, large language models, produce in terms of saying what the process was, telling potentially a requester why it is that certain documents were withheld. We had on the FOIA Advisory Committee last term a model determination letter for government agencies to employ to give requesters more insight into why documents have been fully withheld and partially withheld. What the research shows is that one could do a better determination letter than what most agencies give out. And so it's not perfect, and there haven't been in the research hallucinations, although that is a true problem in the legal profession where lawyers run with Gen AI, produce narratives, and give briefs in court that in about 25 published cases, lawyers have basically been negligent in citing cases that don't exist. But you have to be careful in government. There's a higher standard that a government agency is not providing false information in a narrative. So you do need lawyers and you need human review to look at narratives, but it can be in the future, it can be an intelligent assistant to help FOIA staff, assuming there are any left, to actually do a better job of informing the public of what it is that has been done. It's sort of a transparency point. And so I think this is something we can look to, not this year or next year, but into the future. I also, one last point, in my article, I talk about chatbots, which should be used throughout the government to have a greater engagement with requesters, but also a combination of chatbots and Gen AI. When we put prompts into OpenAI and other models, we get really interesting narratives, just on Google, not a FOIA request, just anything that we do. But there isn't a dialogue in the usual commercial software that's out there now asking us questions. We have to continue to put in prompts. What is hopeful about the future is a hybrid model where you have the ability to have a discussion, have insight from a Gen AI narrative produced by an agency about the document collection that exists and explanations about what's going on. but also have a kind of chatbot feature where there's a back and forth. And, this is, again, it's not tomorrow, but we can dream, we can think about AI in the future. And so that's my positive take for Sunshine Week on that.
Real quick, Jason. Sorry to cut you off. But we had a question on the webinar about this relevant to the chatbot, and I think it's something that we will probably all agree. But the question was that if there is a chatbot type feature, or if you're trying to communicate with an agency as a requester, does the agency need to disclaim that you're not talking with a person? Like it's not, if you right. I think the answer is yes. Now, I mean, I know I've used chatbot features with private companies and they don't tell you. So I don't think there'd be anything in the law to mandate that, but I think that would be a best
That would be
practice.
a provision in the law.
So that's something to add to FOIA, that chatbots shall be disclosed.
If you
You're not a special government employee.
yeah.
Wait until talking to a human is something you have to take.
3 points. One, I think, if folks who use the chatbot, you can kind of tell the chatbot. And then do you want to have a human call you or do you want to talk with you? So I think the triage. The second one, it's good to bring up, I think the traders have lost a lot of, trying to get out of that era, trying to get into what Jason was talking about with search. I'll say here that Sunshine Fest is real time for it with the exemptions built in. That way, we still have that with the technology, we'll have to get everything perfection. And I think FOIA is a dependence and reasonable. So we still have litigation over what was held back as deliverable as well. But trying to get information out there because I don't think we can go to the hill and say we need to extend the time frame for response. I don't think that's going to work as well. Looking at fees, maybe the agencies train. Potentially. But that's one point. The other one is I commend everybody to take a look at an article. His name is Judge Scott Label. He put all to letters, education over regulation. This goes, do we need new laws? If I was to use ChatGPT to write a brief, submit it to one of our judges, we'll lose it. They put my ticket on the line. If I had a junior associate do that, again, they could put my ticket on the line. So we already have had these oversights. Take a look. We've already had, we don't have to be an expert, we have to be efficient. So I think there is a need for some kind of update, but we still have some. I don't think we have to throw all of it out in this exciting shiny object world. That is something I think is great for involvement for advisory committee, tech committee, having that discussion. Tech committee had a conference, I want to say, where they had vendors come in, show what they had. I think bias and this job, but I really think that's a great conversation to have. What is your agency struggling with? Could be different from another agency, but I will say what is exciting about conferences like these are meeting folks who say, how we respond to that, we do this, and it's a wonderful discussion. So I think in short answer is one, our tech is here and it's very fast, but I think we can meet the need as we put our heads together and allow for our technology to be used. But I think we also have to be cautious. So there have been a number of conferences where they're not running right out there to be that case up in New York, Avion Airlines, where the lawyer who's made it, or the system who's made it, filed it. And there's been others. I think if we look at those cases, there has not been a wave of steps. I think those are cautionary tales. But we've got to, I think, keep swimming upstream and realize what we need to do to learn this more educational approach.
So I'll make one quick point, and that is government will need to go kind of faster. The government's going to need to learn how to adopt these technologies very, very quickly. And it's not that hard. Although it is very complicated and it seems very complicated, I really think that, especially by partnering with certain frontier AI labs and others, the government will be able to adopt the generative AI somewhat quickly. If you're willing to, if you're willing to actually change a lot of systems, and there's going to be a lot of change in how these systems currently operate and how all FOIA officers do their work. One of the things I've learned by talking to so many FOIA officers is how many of them actually genuinely love their jobs and what they do and information. They think it's the coolest thing in the world. And they're able to just review government documents and information because people request it. And they want to send that information to the requester whenever they can. Their jobs are going to change. As we were working on this project, we realized that it could be used, for example, to spam FOIA offices with requests. I reviewed more FOIA requests than the Heritage Foundation sent in over the last year. Essentially, these tools can be used to disrupt FOIA officers' lives in a bad way. We don't want that to happen. And the only way to prevent that is for the government to actively adopt these technologies, especially FOIA process technologies, as fast as possible.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll check that one. Your comment.
There's a term of art for when generative AI spawns thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of requests that overcome FOIA capacity of a city, state, and national government. It's a distributed denial of democracy. We are seeing the first signs of that. If you take away the capacity of government to respond and you overwhelm with a flood, then you prioritize proactive disclosures of the information you perform to create an illusion. For instance, that immigrants are more likely to commit crimes, which is false in our country. Combined with state social media, we'll see the evolution of transparency theater with that denial. We must guard against that and not allow the rhetoric of good governance to be weaponized against the same people it's supposed to serve.
Okay, back here, I don't know which one of you had your hand up first. We'll just go you first and then behind. Just speak clearly into the mic for the webinar.
Thank you. Axel Lieberman. I'm with the New York Coalition for Open Government. So we're doing mostly local stuff in the New York State. And my main concern is everybody likes to be a techno-optimist, right? And it can do a lot of good things. But I think we risk losing transparency in the decision-making process. And nobody wants to talk about that because the models per se are opaque. They change all the time. If you talk to any of the creators of large language models, and that is mainly what it's going to be in FOIA, whatever it is on the state and federal level, they will tell you we can't audit our own models, and we're sometimes surprised what they can do. So what I'm concerned about is because it's going to be cheap, it's going to be fast, and communities are really, really hard pressed to process that stuff and not spend money on it. So what is going to happen is they're going to adopt it, it's going to be a shiny toy, and nobody will understand why these decisions being made anymore. So you cannot appeal it because you will ask, like, why was that denied? And they will say, well, because the digital overlord told us so. And there will be no more expertise, especially on the local level, why these decisions were made. And I'm really concerned about that because it will accelerate things, but I think we will lose a lot of expertise and transparency. These models will most probably be proprietary. So even if you say, hey, can we please audit that? Show me why this decision was made. You will look at the contract and say, well, that is not disclosure because that is a proprietary software. So I think we really need to think about this because this is coming. The city of, Saratoga Springs, 28,000 people in New York State, in the middle of New York State, they just voted on using a software to process FOIA requests. So this is coming, the city council voted it down, but this is not far-fetched stuff. And I talked to them and it was very clear that they didn't even understand that problematic aspect of it. So I think that really needs to be on the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any response?
It's so important to keep humans in the loop, especially when using and implementing these new technologies. I think there are so many benefits of using these technologies to process FOIA requests. that Professor Barron alluded to, for example, these models, I am very good at synthesizing and analyzing information. That's how I pay people here when they pay my money for bills. These models are better than me in that. They can find different nuances and twists that I could not. And that's just because they are able to take all of this data and analyze it with I can kind of a language that I can't speak. So understanding that's one of their big strengths, knowing how to pair that with the human reviewer that is able to then look at, say, and it's not the same response to documents, response to modeling response to this one for their FOIA request or FOIA request. If you were making a FOIA request at Saratoga Springs Police Department, there is technology that exists, I guarantee you, that probably isn't implemented yet, that could just pull all of the case files that would have any kind of relevance and sort them all by the relevance. The human reviewer can then go and review all of those files. The human reviewer has been there for a while. We've talked with many FOIA officers who live agencies, everyone, those agencies over many administrations. They might recognize, hey, this file is missing, but honestly, given those technologies, it would be hard to have it down.
Yeah, real quick.
I understand your point about black box and explainability, but the choices are waiting for months or years for old style human review or using what, let's stipulate, possibly a flawed process, but one that is extremely efficient and gets a lot of product out in terms of documents. So that's the world we're in. I'd love a world where everything was explainable by algorithms, but we have to be in that world given what the volume of records are.
Real quick. So at the federal level, the Supreme Court blew a hole in the FOIA in the Argus Leader case. And that's exemption 4 for business proprietary information. And the result of that across the US government is that anything that could be proprietary information for businesses is being held back. To this point, we've not been able to get Congress to put a patch on that for many reasons. We talk about FOIA. The thing that I would say to everyone at the state and local level right now is to get reforms into law that says that businesses that provide FOIA services cannot be exempted in terms of their processes from the FOIA. So do not allow any technology that's being used not to be open by default, not to have auditability, not to be able to be explained and to be exempted from disclosure to avoid this black box problem.
I would say even aside from the exemption 4 problem, I mean, there's been long a fight about access to software that agencies use, whether it even qualifies as a record.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
It should.
Argus Leader notwithstanding.
Actually, it's great panel. Dave Levine at the difficult name Elon University School and Stanford University Radio. So the previous speaker actually raised the issue I wanted to raise, and I write on trade secrecy and how it operates with this technology. It's a huge problem. So I'm going to put forward on that a little bit further. We know, of course, that AI is being used right now in a whole host of ways that are not opaque. In fact, we don't even know how they're being used by the other Elon. And people in this room have been impacted by it. I'm curious whether you think that FOIA is the kind of test case scenario, perhaps, where we could force some transparency and understanding where it otherwise wouldn't happen. What do I mean? In North Carolina, where I am, very few people will know federal government employees who lost their jobs, and which is sad, but that's the reality. But they will, to Alex's point and others' point, see bad decisions being made. Now, FOIA is one of those areas where, because of how it's used, people don't see that as much as well until, of course, they don't get information. Can FOIA be a test case to push back not just on how AI is being used in this space or could be used, but more broadly, the opaque decision making that's causing tens of thousands of people to lose their jobs and God knows what else?
Anybody want to take that? Do we think FOIA is up to the task, in other words?
Yeah.
I mean, this gets to the question of, does the statute need a reform? Okay, Nick, you're the guy, and then I want to get to another question.
Super quick. I give you a longer answer, but Ryan, I would say it's an interesting point because let's put an algorithm up with. Do you want to see that, or do you want to see how it was trained? And as Professor Barron attorney, I'm sorry, recovering, but it is one of those things where rock and hard place of long time, quick, and then back to the previous question, that's the tension where we get Ryan to sue on. And I think it's also one of those things where we see this like, well, everything's AI, but then we use all of our services around our home to say, and which ones do we like, which ones do we use, which ones work, which ones are in our complete reports. But it's a great point. I think that's something is the customer, whether it's the FOIA officer or the FOIA requester, helps kind of determine that. And I think it's one of those where we want information as we extract that through the process. I say the design exemptions from that books.
Okay. I might go a little over because we started this a little late. So hopefully you all stick around, but I want to at least get two more questions.
Howdy folks, my name is James. I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm a part of two professional freelance journalism organizations, and we talk about AI a lot. It's a big debate in the journalism community. I want to talk about security because, as you guys mentioned, there are like already on this cloud, there's billions and billions of documents. We have seen concerns with, especially foreign adversaries, gaining access to some of those documents at some point. There has been recently instances where data and documents have been pulled by our own government. Causing security concerns. And like my concern is like, okay, now we're throwing AI into all of these documents. How do we keep this system secure? And also, how do we keep AI, like if we're using AI for FOIA, how do we keep that from bad actors or from, the billionaires that own the AI companies? How do we ensure that they're not influencing, what records are pulled or like influencing these processes? How do we ensure that, if we're using AI for FOIA, that the system itself is secure and that if you walk into somewhere and, request a sensitive document, then you can go to a different room and view that document on your own. So like essentially just how do we keep this. Thank you.
Okay. It's making these demands of the companies, especially when entering into contracts with them. We have OpenAI's, we could release the GPT or something like that, and they're providing AI services to various agencies. It would surprise me if they were able to train or allowed to train on that data or review that data for certain reasons, especially unredacted versions of that. It is possible to anonymize that kind of data, as that way you can more carefully come over. So I'd say demanding privacy protections and things like that to ensure that the data is protected. So, and this goes to the last question too. Someone's wondering about how we know what the government's doing with AI. Mudrock has done a phenomenal job cataloging all of the different use cases through various chief FOIA officer reports, I believe. So I would definitely recommend checking that out as a resource. When I say that we need to move at a fast pace here, I'm a big fan of FOIA, especially for wizard search. Interoperability with different agencies for FOIA.gov. So I want to say 9 years in, quite some time. And that was years after Congress had mandated that for essentially, and years after various presidents had demanded compliance from different agencies. That can't happen again. So we need to be making these demands pretty quickly because this is going to move very fast.
All right. I think we had was there a question back here? Okay, I'll go to Kevin. Last question.
Maybe good.
Better be a good one.
Okay, so I'm going to fill out the question we had a little bit ago, which Urban, I think you mostly responded to in the context of the use of large language models. And I think that your reply mostly focused on the use of AI as a data analytics. And I think those are two different, very distinct applications of AI that I think have pretty severe implications for the way the FOIA is processed. So the use of large language models as a means of replacing civil servants as a tool of austerity is something we've already seen in the all around the world. Like the UK government under Labour is doing it. Joe Biden was advocating for this. When he was still in the White House, I think we're going to see an accelerated law. And when the idea is we control AI by having a man in the middle, like some human control, I don't know how it is that you can check back against the willingness and eagerness by a lot of politicians to use AI as a tool of austerity to diminish the overall workforce when they can just say, oh, well, we had a human review the decision of the AI, even though that human would normally be reviewing maybe 50 records in a day, and now they're reviewing 500, and they either check the box to say, yes, the AI did a good job, or no, the AI didn't do a good job, explain why. And I think that the pressure to revert to the mean in the way that LLMs work in general, but additionally in the way that we oversee LLMs, is going to be a really severe threat. And I just don't see a way that you can check back against that through a legal text other than, don't do that. And I'm just curious if there are any thoughts on like the way that you would govern AI as a valuable tool, but not one that can be used as a means of just gutting administrative capacity because now we can do it. The same comment earlier about wait until you have to pay money to talk to a human person.
Any thoughts? Okay. So that is a lot, and those are very valid points. I think we are currently in a time of austerity, and that's what the president is saying. And AI can be a tool to really press down on that austerity and press down on the pain. There are some changes that are going to happen to the workforce. So a lot of different academics on folks perspective. For example, call centers. Turns out that LLMs, when deployed in very specific ways, are able to place a lot of call center operators. I think we have something like 20,000 call center operators at the IRS. And those 20,000 folks are understaffed. They are currently having to go through something like 40 million phone calls. That's a lot of phone calls and not that many call center operators relatively. However, in 5 years, I can't tell you where the technology will be. I only know that it will be much better than it is now when it comes to replacing those kinds of jobs. So if I were to also work at the IRS, I'd be a bit scared that my job is going to change. That's where our politicians have to come and start making demands of the administration of, hey, even in this changing environment, you must remember these positions must be preserved in X, Y, and Z ways. I don't know what that's going to look like. I think it's going to scare a lot of people. And I think that folks have been preparing as well as they could have for this.
All right, with that, I know we've gone 5 minutes over, or 7 minutes over. I apologize for that. Thank you all. I think this was a very interesting conversation. Americans for Prosperity Foundation.org/sunshine. All the essays are posted up there. Thank you for those of you who joined online. I'm sorry for any technical difficulties. This is our first time doing a hybrid format. So we'll get it better next year. But thank you, panelists, and thank you all. Enjoy lunch.
Thank you.